Alright, ladies and gentlemen, today we got a iPhone 6 Plus. If it had an S back here, it would be a 6S Plus, but since we don't have the little S with the box around it, we know it's an iPhone 6. Plus, I also checked the model number. There's a right here above the IMEI. There's a model number that you can look up. It starts with an A followed by 4 digits, and that way you can for sure identify your iPhone. This one's dead. We have a this is my buddy's phone, so I already know everything works. Or what you should do is always test the home button, all the function buttons and everything before you start these repairs, and make sure that if you do happen to have something that stops functioning afterwards, you can kind of hopefully remember back what you were doing and maybe identify where the issue might be. So here we got all of our tools here that we're going to need. I'm going to disconnect this, get this out of the way. So I got a various set of tweezers here. I get a plastic pry tool, Phillips head screwdriver, and the pentalobe. So we're going to set this off to the side here for a minute. So we're going to start by opening up the phone by the 2 bottom screws. Then we're going to get our trusty razor blade or pry tool or whatever you want. I use razor blades because the edge is really small and I don't want to mar up my housing at all. I don't really care about the screen since it's already broke. So what we're going to do is go in here, and we're not going to go in very deep. We're only going to go in as far as that beveled edge of the blade. We do not want to stick this thing into the phone because we don't want to nick anything, short anything out, or damage anything that would be unrepairable. I already know this phone's been fixed before because the IMEI number on the back has been blanked out. So they obviously had turned this in on insurance at one point, and then they re-etched the new IMEI on the back of the phone. Alright, so there we go. Once we get that, and we get it to the point where it's loose like this, we're going to go ahead and lift this up carefully. Alright, I'd highly recommend that you go in and disconnect the battery. That's going to be under this plate here. So we'll go ahead and do that. That's what this is for. We want to be very, very careful that we do not just dig this thing in and pry that up. We just want to lightly lift on the edge very carefully, as if the thing's going to break or explode. Just treat it with extreme care, because you will damage something on the motherboard. There are tiny chips placed on this one. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot around there, but there are certain phones that there's a lot of small electronics around that area there. You don't want to inadvertently nick those. And we're going to go ahead and hold this power button down for 10 seconds to kind of drain anything off the logic board as much as possible. Okay, if you have the opportunity to just let the phone go dead completely before this repair, that's even better. What we're trying to avoid is any residual power on the logic board that might be there, so when we go to plug in our new screen, we're not shorting anything out. Some of the problems that can happen when you're done is the phone boots, but the display's pretty much black. You can see it maybe under a light, but it's completely dark, or part of the screen is dark. And what's happened there is either you've taken one of these screws and misplaced them, so it's very important that these screws, you keep them in the same order that they are on the phone, and even take the plate off. And you can, these are white tweezers, real nice. Place it like this, so we know that this screw goes there, this one goes here, that one goes there, this one goes here, and this one goes over there, because these are all different sizes and shapes. Alright, next step is we're going to go ahead and disconnect our connectors very carefully. And you may not see any electronics or components around these connectors, but they are there. They're covered by this black tape here. So we're just going to continue working our way around that one, and then we'll get this one, and then our last one back here. This is going to be a long connector, so you're going to want to pry from both ends so we don't break that. Alright, and there we go. Our screen is free and clear from the phone. We'll just set the phone off to the side, and then we're going to go ahead and unbox our new screen. I'll post a link in the description on where to get these, and basically you're wanting to look, this should be a darker gray on the back here. It's a good sign that this QR code's there. I don't know if this is an original display. It doesn't appear so. If it's an original display, it should have a Apple logo like this one does here. On this long cable. So as you can see the difference in our cables here. So we know that this is an aftermarket screen. If this had a Apple logo, it very well could be a rebuilt display, which is not a bad thing. It just means you're getting the original quality on your screen. Now there may not necessarily be anything wrong with this one. Should function just fine. But if you're a stickler about that kind of stuff, those are the things to look for. Alright, so we're going to take this red tape off. Sometimes they're blue. You don't want to leave that in the phone. This is a nicer screen, as we got our plastic brackets for our front camera and our light sensor here. They're already pre-installed on this, so we don't have to transfer those over. The same for our earpiece speaker. But we are going to want to take this blue tape off here. It's important that this is removed, because if you leave this on, it's going to block the hole for your microphone, and when you go to FaceTime or put the phone on speaker, you're going to lose comms, or it's going to be extremely muffled. Alright, so we'll start by removing this plate. And again, these screws are all going to be different too, so we're just going to pick another spot on our work area here. To organize our screws. So you're going to have 3 on each side. So I'm going to put those 3 together over here, one at the bottom. This plate here, I'm just going to take the plate off, and I'm going to put those separate, in a separate spot, so that I know that they go on the left and right. And then I'll take this plate and stick it with those 2 screws. And then we're going to take this earpiece out. We'll put that above our plate screws. 1 and 2 and 3. Keep those organized, because they are different sizes as well. And then we'll take that little plate off, and we'll stick it with those 3 screws. 1, 2, 3. So we know that those go in that order. And then we'll spin this around here. Take these last 3 screws out. Put those on the other side of our laid out screws over here. Like so. Now our plate should be free. Actually, we're going to have there's going to be a long cable that runs through here, so we don't want to forget about that. So this is very critical that you're very careful with this as well. So we're going to have this home button that we do not want to damage, because if we damage this home button, it's going to lose it's going to lose our Touch ID abilities. So what we want to do, and if you do use a razor blade, you need to be extremely careful and make sure that any kind of pressure that you're putting underneath this thing is towards this plastic piece and not up, because we don't want to damage any of these components on this cable here. It usually is lifted in this back corner right here. See how I can easily stick my razor blade under there, but it's stuck, and you don't want to grab this and pull it up because you will rip that cable. It'll either rip right here or it'll rip down here at the home button itself. So we're just going to go under there and just as simple as that, just lift that off there, because it's going to have some kind of adhesive on the back side of this cable. And then we're just going to leave that the way that is. We'll get to that, back to that in a minute. And then you're also going to have this cable, this long cable that runs under here. If you do damage this, fortunately they are replaceable, but save yourself a lot of grief and do it the right way first time. So again, I'm going to put pressure, and I don't even care if I scratch this plastic. I just want to make sure that I'm at the plastic, because there is a metal plate behind this, and we don't want to separate the metal plate from the cable. So again, we're just going to slowly work, and just take your time and just slowly lift that up. We don't want to pry it, pull it. It's just we're trying to break the adhesive away from that plastic. So there, now we're free. Alright, so then we're going to lift this up. Watching our cable here, we don't want that to get hung up and then inadvertently rip it at that point. And then we're just going to slide this out. It's going to have a long cable in those, so it's best to come back a little bit and then out. Okay, so we'll lay this over here. And then we're going to have our front earpiece speaker. This is going to have a laid over camera. So we're basically just going to roll this back out of the way. We're going to remove the earpiece speaker. And then again, we're going to have some cables and stuff here that need to be gently pried up. So that came out nice and neat, but you don't want to lift that up too fast, because it does have that light sensor on there back here that sometimes it will get stuck in this bracket, and when you go to pull that up, it'll rip the light sensor off and it'll be in the hole there and your cable's free. And then you're going to be replacing this proximity sensor. So what will happen is, if that's damaged and that's stuck in there, when you make a phone call and you put the phone up to your face, it's not going to go dark. So you end up hitting buttons and stuff. So here's our front microphone. And again, we just don't want to pry that out, because that is a flex cable. You know, that stuff is soldered to that cable. We don't want to pry on it. So here we go. This is going to have a little black rubber gasket around this other sensor. So we're going to leave that intact the way that is. And there we go. So we're done with this outside of our home button. Well, that's going to come out nice and easy. This should have adhesive around there, and it shouldn't just pop out like that, but that's fine. On these models, since there's a bracket that goes over the top of this, it's not that big of an issue to have that adhesive wore out. You can get the newer, you can order the rubber gaskets that go around there that have the adhesive on there if you need to replace it, or if yours is completely gone, or the screen's so damaged that the glass is just stuck to the adhesive. Alright, so our next step is we're going to work our way backwards, and we're going to start with this. We're going to go ahead and put our metal bracket back in place here, like so. There's a little lip down here that this needs to sit behind, so we're just going to push that back a little bit. And there's a little plastic piece here. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. There's a little plastic lip here that that's going to sit into. So once it's behind that and it's sat down, that's good. We don't need to mess with it anymore. And then we're going to go ahead and start securing our side screws. These middle 3 screws on each side. They can go in, they can crisscross, they can go up, down, doesn't matter where they go back in. They are all the same size. So it's not crucial that we go and put those in any particular order. And the reason we're doing these first over everything else, we want to make sure that this metal bracket is centered and it's where it needs to be sitting. And these 6 screws will ensure that it's pretty much where it needs to be before we proceed forward and start putting the rest of the stuff on. And I'm not tightening these down. Just that one I tightened, this one I'll tighten, and then you'll snug them down. What you're wanting to do is kind of leave them all loose so the thing kind of just adjusts itself as you get all 6 screws started, if that makes sense. Okay, now we're going to start installing this camera bracket. This thing looks really complicated, and especially if it's a brand new one, because it's going to be all laid out and flat. But basically what you want is this microphone bent up underneath here, and that should be across from your light sensors. Once you bend it in there, this top camera is going to lay over the top. So all we're going to do is flatten out the rest of these cables there, or they're out of our way, with our finger. Hold them down with our, hold these down with our finger, and then we're going to take our, any kind of tool, doesn't matter what it is, whatever works. And there's a little nipple here, plastic piece, and there's a hole right above our microphone, right there. And we're basically going to line that hole up on top of that plastic nub there. Once we get it somewhat close, there we go. Now the next step is you're going to take your finger, keep holding these down over here, but then you're going to push this thing back, hold it, and then you're going to kind of massage those sensors into their brackets. And if you get them, it should feel smooth. You shouldn't feel any kind of, I don't know, like it's sticking up anywhere. It should feel flat. Then you're going to take your earpiece speaker. It's going to have a little protruding part there. That's going to go into that rubber spot, that rubber bracket. Same thing with that. You can kind of move it around until it kind of, you feel that it's kind of in that bracket. There we go. I felt it kind of lodge in there. And then this is going to come over the top. You're going to have 4 contacts here, and there's going to be a key on each side here. Again, there's going to be plastic protruding standoffs there that you can make sure that that's lined up. Our camera's going to go into its bracket, and then we just want to make sure that we can see those plastic things through each hole. That just tells me that each one of those contacts are on one of those springs. That's important, because if any of that's messed up there, you're going to lose your earpiece speaker. And then we're going to take our camera bracket and set that over the top. And the same thing, those plastic things are going to come through the back of that that metal bracket. They're not going to stick through it, but they're going to be there. They just need to be lined up. So I usually start with this middle screw first. I don't tighten it all the way down because I want it to kind of move around and fall into place. I'll do this outside screw, same thing, just make sure it's started. And then we'll get this last screw here and put that over here. That one we will tighten down. And then we'll go here and then here. We're not going super tight. If you do have blue Loctite and you want to put it back on the screws and put them back in there, that is something that you can do too, because these screws can come can come loose since we don't wrench down on them and really tighten them down. Over time they can back themselves out of there. Alright, so we're done with this top side of the screen. This needs to be outside of this, like so. And to make sure that we have our cables properly placed when we flip our screen over, none of these should be covered by another cable. So that tells me that we got them all lined up properly. We're going to put our home button in like that, and then we'll push down here on the back side because it's going to have that adhesive, and then we'll plug that in. You'll hear it click in there, and that should feel flat as well. And then we're going to go with our bottom screw of our plate that we took out and put with the other 6 screws, and then put that screw went in right here, and then we'll put this plate in, and I'm not going to tighten that all the way down like I did the others. That way I can, this has some play. There's going to be another plastic protruding piece here that's going to keep that lined up. So there we go. If these little stickers bother you, you can take a isopropyl alcohol and a Q-tip, and you can rub all that stuff off. Alright, so now comes time when we're going to plug this back into our phone. There's going to be a little plastic piece here that's going to be in your way, so you're going to take that, bend that out of the way. We don't want that to go into our phone. Alright, so then we're going to start with our back connector here. Lift our finger up, and we're just going to kind of set it on there. You'll know if you're lined up. You'll feel it start to it'll kind of key itself into the connector on this is probably the hardest part of this whole repair, is making sure that you get these lined up properly and that they're plugged in properly. You don't want to force them because you will damage the connector on either the phone side or the LCD side. If you damage it on the phone side, there are some repair services out there that will change these connectors out for you. This one is being difficult. Okay, we got it. But patience is key. You don't want to rush it. You don't want to force it in there. You just want to make sure that you get it lined up and you get it on there properly. And then we're going to put this front camera bracket in there. Those usually go in fairly easy. And then we're going to have our last one here. Alright, so those should all feel like they're in there. You shouldn't feel a raised side on one side or the other on any of those connectors. And then we'll go ahead and take our metal bracket. We're going to lay it in here. It's not going to want to sit flat. So we're going to find that this screw is going to be the easiest to put in first. So we'll go ahead and get that one started. a magnetic tip screwdriver works wonders for this. Okay, we're going to just get that started. You'll know that it started because it'll start, that plate will start going down. And then we're going to go to that this outer corner. Get that one started. And then we'll go back to this inside corner. You can see the difference in the size of these screws. I mean, this one's really long up here in this top right corner. This one here, and we'll have this one here, okay, and then we're going to reconnect our battery and put on our plate. Get our screws back in there. Don't do that. Okay. Now if you happen to do this repair and you find, I always kind of do a scan around here to make sure there's no other screws that have came loose, because sometimes some of these will come out in these various spots. You can go around with your screwdriver and just kind of make sure that they're snug. If your battery has any kind of bulging to it whatsoever, that can also be an issue, and you may have to replace that. If they bulge, they'll push up on your screen. Alright, so to put this back in here, we want to make sure that that little lip of plastic is out of our phone. And then this is going to slide in first up here. Like so. Shouldn't really have much of a gap up here if you get it in there. And then we're just going to kind of lightly press along the edges until it seats down in there. You don't want to force it. Definitely don't want to push right here. That's a weak point on the glass. One thing that does help to get this in there is if you put a flat razor blade here at the bottom and then kind of just press this forward slightly, that'll snug it up at the top and allow that to seat back in there. Like so. And there we go. That's in there, it's flush on that end. And then we're going to put our two bottom screws back in. Helps if you use the right screwdriver. Just going to snug those up, don't want to wrench down on them or tighten them down too tight. And there we go. Take our power cable here. Just make sure we get a logo again. This was dead when we first started, so not a big deal. And there's our charge indication, so we know it's charging. And then once this powers up, we'll go through all the tests, make sure all the function buttons work. And that's pretty much it. Let me know how yours goes. Please share this video, like, and subscribe. Thank you. Bye.